about conscientious wellness. I feel like words like self-care, mindfulness, wellness are kind of getting used a lot, which is great that we're talking about mental health and wellness, but we're also like, I think we've sort of lost a little bit of the meaning of like, what does that really look like? And for folks like you who are actually doing that work for other people, for your communities, for your staff members, that looks different and needs to look different than I think what some of us may be experiencing. So, my name is Andy Gates. I'm an independent marriage and family therapist. I'm located right here in Central Ohio, and I work with individuals and groups to do horticultural therapy, to garden. Sometimes I'm bringing the plants to you, sometimes I'm working outside. I don't have any disclosures to make. So here's what we're going to be looking at today. It's a couple of things. Number one, you're all taking home a live plant. You are going to get them later today, as I understand they're going to be brought to you, so please keep an eye out for that. I want to mention that today because the plants I've brought with me are big boy versions of the ones that you're getting, not all of them, but some of them, okay? So I want to have an understanding of like these very, very small plants you're getting, this is what they look like when they're big. We're focused on a couple of things here. One, what are some common mental health problems and concerns? Two, boundaries. Ooh, boundaries. No. Telling people no. Everybody's favorite subject. But in all seriousness, what are healthy relationships? What does that look like? How do you do self-care for yourself? How do you do it for other people? What does that look like at work? What does that look like at home? What does that look like in all of your settings? And the last piece is, how do you actually do mindfulness? Because if we're being really, really technical, mindfulness is the active cultivation of nothing. So how do you do nothing? I'm sure someone was like, I do nothing all the time when I'm sitting on my phone. That's not mindfulness. Scrolling Instagram is fun and hilarious, not quite the same thing. Couple things to keep in mind. A garden requires patient labor and attention. Okay? Plants do not grow merely to satisfy ambition or to fulfill good intentions. The purpose of growing tomatoes is not specifically to have as many tomatoes as humanly possible so you can be the monarch of tomatoes. They thrive specifically because someone expended effort on them, okay? This is the thing I want you to remember about yourself and your community. We thrive because we expend effort on ourselves, and we expend effort on the people around us. That's why anything grows, why anything thrives. So, why plants? I could be up here with geodes, or crystals, or books, or reptiles, or cats.
Oh, yeah.
I've considered that. I piloted it briefly. It did not go well. We are organic. Humans are organic. You're not a car. You're not a machine. You're not a building, which seems like an obvious thing to say, but we are much, much, much closer to plants and to living organic creatures. We're much closer to the pets that we have at home, to the living things that we encounter than we are the mechanical things we often describe ourselves as. We are made up of cells to restore, to heal, to grow, to thrive. We don't have parts that can be fixed or replaced, right? This isn't a situation of, oh, my mental fan belt is broken, so I'll just run down to AutoZone and have them throw in a new one and it'll be good as new, right? Doesn't work that way. It'd be cool if it did, but it's not how it works. So, when we compare ourselves to mechanical objects, because I hear this all the time from the people in my office and the people I come into contact with, I'm broken. I have a problem I need to fix. I have somebody who's trying to fix the problem instead of just listening to me, right? It's those kinds of words. fixing, broken, repair. But the thing is, we're not a mechanical object. We can't be fixed because we aren't broken. There's nothing to be fixed about you, ever. Trees experience life in an old-growth forest, right? They might be hit by lightning. They might get burned. They might get caught down in a forest fire. They might get termites. That tree is never broken. There's nothing wrong with that tree. We're able to look at that tree and say, oh, there's environmental factors. Oh, there's genetic factors. Oh, there's just something about how it grew. It's not broken, it's not wrong, there's nothing bad about it, it's just what it is. And oftentimes when we're looking at trees, we're looking at like, wow, isn't it amazing that that tree like kind of fell off that cliff there and it's able to still grow despite all that. Those are the things that we marvel at. And then we turn around and tell ourselves, oh, well, you know, I'm struggling to get through this time in my life, so I'm broken, I need to be fixed. So if you ignore the next 45 minutes and you remember nothing else, I want you to remember that you are not a tree, or you are a tree. If you are not a toaster, you're not broken, we don't throw you in the trash because you lost the knob, you are a tree, okay? So what's the problem, right? Raise your hand if you killed a plant. Everybody's hand should be going up. If your hand is not up, you have never owned a plant.
Right.
So, let's talk about some common mental health issues from common plants. And let me introduce to you my first guest.
Oh.
This is Jeff. Jeff is a nerve plant. Jeff has a name because Jeff is a head. I like Jeff too.
Yeah.
Jeff is a nerve plant. This is actually, just a note, this is a closed terrarium. So nerve plants really, really thrive in glass containers like this. If you put a cactus in this container, it's going to die. But Jeff really likes being in our glass container here, okay? And as you can see, Jeff's not a huge plant. For a nerve plant, that's actually a very, very great size. Jeff's about a year old, so nerve plants really only live to be 3 to 5, so that plant will get a little bigger, but not a ton. I've also taken some cuttings off of it, so that's something to consider. I like nerve plants to talk about mental health because their scientific name is Fittonia. They will have a fit on ya. They are dramatic. They are expressive, and people will tell you they're very, very difficult to care for. And the reality is they're not difficult to care for at all. They're just communicative. If they're dry, they will lay completely flat on the soil and look dead. They are prone to curl. They are prone to burn. They will let you know. That doesn't mean that other plants don't do those things. It just means they're less communicative. You're not going to notice. If you have a cactus that's rotting underneath the soil, you're not going to know until it's all the way dead. Cactuses are not communicative. They're very stoic. So they're also prone to drop. And what that means is when they're water stressed, they wilt. Okay? So that's when we talk about plants dropping, that's what we're talking about here. Mental health is not a one-size-fits-all practice. Some of us are very expressive about our feelings. Some of us really kind of keep our feelings inward. Some of us are prone to anxiety. Some of us are prone to depression. Anxiety and depression on the surface level are just feelings. We all have anxiety. We all have depression. We will all go through those things at times in our life. Some of us have anxiety and depression to a level where we need to talk to somebody like me, right? It's a little bit hard to manage. There's a little bit more going on in your life, or neurologically, chemically, biologically, you struggle maybe with one or the other or both a little more than somebody else you may pass on the street. And anxiety is especially a very normal feeling, because if we didn't have anxiety, no one would pay their bills. We just wouldn't, it wouldn't matter. So that little bit of like, ooh, consequences, that's essentially what anxiety is. Where it becomes a mental health issue is that it's run amok, right? Where we're like, oh, my bills, and I wonder if my cat misses me, and I wonder what I'm going to be doing in 3 years, and I wonder if that person that looked at me funny in 3rd grade still hates me. Like, too much, right? The person in 3rd grade is not thinking about you, and I can tell you that much. Plants are not a one-size-fits-all practice. I'm going to show you 4 different plants today. not one of them requires the same care. No. These are all 4 different plants that all require 4 different types of care. These are 4 out of 100 that I have in the house. Oh, come on, I do this for a living. You really, what kind of plant lady if I said, oh yeah, I have about 3. Come on. So, nerve plants are named because they flush the color along the nerve of the plant, right? They like to have a lot of water, they like consistency. Some of us are consistent people. We need that kind of consistency and structure in our lives to feel okay. And they have a lot to teach us. Also, as a side note, some of you will be getting polka dot plants today. They're kissing cousins. They're very, very similar. So what I'm saying about the nerve plants also apply to polka dot plants. Nerve plants want us to take time to know ourselves. I think oftentimes people attend to plant care from, I'll water it when I remember to, which is great, but that's not what Jeff wants. Jeff wants your attention and your consistency. Jeff doesn't care if you water Jeff at 9 a.m. on Monday morning or 3 a.m. on Friday evening. Jeff just wants you to water Jeff consistently, all at once. It's important to kind of know, what are the basics of you? What I need for self-care is probably not what some of y'all need for self-care. I'm a human that needs a lot of movement. Partially because a lot of my day when I'm seeing clients is sitting. So by the time I get home, I don't want to do more sitting. Oftentimes people say, hey, come sit down. Why don't you sit and rest? Like, I've been doing sitting. I don't need to sit anymore for me. But for a lot of you, if you're on your feet all day, if you're physiologically taking care of other people, taking care of yourself might mean actually giving yourself permission to sit down. Even if you're just in your car, driving from one place to another, especially if you have families and everything else, and you're transporting kids, take just a minute in the car to sit there and be before you get in the car, drive to Target, run to Target, get out of Target, go back in the car, do the thing, right? You can create breaks in the middle of those things. If you know you need a lot of human contact, if you need to see your friends 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, if what I just said sounds overwhelming, you're like, I don't know 3 or 4 or 5 people to see that many times a week. You probably don't need that, and that's okay, right? Self-care is necessary maintenance. It is required. I'm sure you've all heard you can't pour from an empty cup. Where do you get the water to fill your cup up? Self-care, right? This is the water that we pour into ourselves. Because if I'm not pouring into myself, I can't pour into you. I can't pour into my family. I can't pour into my plants or the cats or whatever else is in my life. I certainly then don't have extra, right? That means I can't show up in a communal sense. I can't show up for other people. And oftentimes we're taking what little water we have and immediately turning around and giving it to someone else, and then we end up burned out. We end up anxious, stressed, depressed, tired, fatigued. And then very specifically, what's unique to you? Are there things about you that you have to take into consideration? If you have a health condition, if you have a chronic illness, if you have family considerations, if you have people that you're caretaking for, right? Not just your plants, but if you have nieces, nephews, kids, relatives, aging parents, if you have a combination of those things, you are going to show up differently. You might need different self-care. Your self-care may need to look different. All of us have some common and some unique needs, right? Everybody needs to stay hydrated. Drink water, please. We all have some unique needs as well, in which we need to know in order to address. So, some things to keep in mind for the basics. So, Jeff's final lesson before we introduce our next friend. Jeff is here to remind us to just take time to reflect and listen to ourselves, our minds, and our bodies. Because that's really if we don't listen to Jeff, Jeff will yell at us about Jeff's needs. So that's what our nurse plan friends are here to tell us. So thank you to Jeff. Okay, boundaries. Hooray, boundaries. This is actually my favorite part of the presentation, to be honest with you, because I don't feel like we talk enough about how to set healthy boundaries in relationships. So, This is our next plant. This is a syngonium. It's also called an arrowhead plant. And they do just look like this. It does just look crazy all the time. This plant's never not going to look crazy. It's never not going to look tall and everything else. So this is a syngonium. They come in a lot of different varieties. Eventually they will grow tall and then theoretically vine over. Mine just get tall. I've never actually seen them vine. So I now have some of these that are like 3 feet tall and I'm waiting for them to sort of drop. Syngoniums can stand upright or they can grow to vine. They can be trellised if you want to keep it upright. You can put a little trellis in there, or you can just allow it to vine. These are weird ones because they want to be snug in the pot. I talked to a lot of folks who have killed these because they keep potting them up because they've gotten huge and then they've killed them. Because syngoniums really want close boundaries. They want to be kept tight in the pot. Now there's a difference between being root bound, in which the roots have encircled so much that they've actually strangled the plant, versus just being kept snug in the pot. They have to have structure. They have to have a tight pot. They're going to need some type of trellis, or they're going to need to be allowed to vine, or you're just going to need to cut them back. I've cut this plant back probably 6 or 7 times, and it's still just like popping off and going crazy. They're also going to be regular fertilizer because they're really aggressive growers. This is kind of a pro tip. They will go wild if not maintained. And you can say the same thing about our relationships. If we don't work to maintain the relationships we have, they tend to go wild, which is why people tend to either violate our boundaries or violate other people's boundaries because that structure is missing. Syngoniums, arrowhead plants, they need support. They also need containment. And they need frequent environmental assessment and support to thrive. We also need all of those same things. Every single one of you in this room. We need support, we need containment. And containment sounds kind of like a big scary thing, but really what containment means is I know where I start and stop, and you start and stop, right? Like, I know where my lines are and your lines are. There is really something to be said for good fences make good neighbors. We have to, and oftentimes when we feel like somebody's encroaching in on our business, right, it's because they've asked us an inappropriate question, or a question that we don't feel comfortable answering, or they've said something that is maybe in conflict with our beliefs, things like that. So we need to be able to say, hey, that's fine, you keep that over there. So we also have the power to redraw our boundaries as needed. And boundaries don't always have to be saying no, right? This is a big, I could probably speak to you guys for like 3 days straight on just boundaries, but I think we would probably walk out after like an hour and a half of that. Let me go back on. So the thing about boundaries is if you imagine these things like fences, you live on a farm, and in the middle of the farm is your house. And just you lives in that house. I don't care if you're married, I don't care how long you've been married, I don't care if you have kids, just you in that house. Not nobody else, because that's your inner stuff. That is the entirety of your being there. And then outside of the house is like the dogs and the chickens and the relationships we want to keep closest to us. So that might be our family. Those are the relationships that we want to keep a closer eye on. And chickens don't just always live free range. They have a coop, they have a house, they go in at night to protect them from foxes. And then as you get farther out, you might have your cows or your sheep, the relationships that you don't need to check on so frequently. They're kind of roaming. And then you have your like corn and your grains and the last fence. And then that very last fence, the one you usually see by the highway that's like 2 sticks with like wire in between, or like 1 piece of stick in between, like that fence isn't keeping anybody out, but I'm gonna respect it because it's there. Right? That's our societal boundary. That's our like, I'm not going to swear at the barista when I get my morning coffee, right? That's our like, our very basic lines. So now imagine for a second that you have a cow that's never had a fence in its life, and it's eating all your corn, and you decide to try and contain the cow. That cow's gonna be really mad at you, because it's lived its whole life being able to free range, right? This is what it's like trying to contain an in-law that's never had boundaries. right? You're trying to herd the cow. No more corn for you, back in the fence. This metaphor is helpful to kind of think through your relationships. What kind of fence do you use? Do you need like a 8-foot high electric fence for this person, or do you just need like a small little wrought iron fence with like a small gate? You know, where your friends can say, oh, I see you have a fence here. It doesn't always mean saying no to people. Sometimes it just means saying like, hey, don't call me after 8 p.m. This is my biggest thing with my little sister. Don't call me after 8 p.m. I don't know what kind of mess you got into, but I can't help you. So she don't call me after 8 p.m. And that's fine. So, self-care and having an understanding of your needs is the basis of mental health, right? Your nerve plan, knowing yourself, that's the baseline. One step up from that is maintaining those relationships between people and maintaining your supports. The next piece of this is healthy environments. Okay. So, how do you actually do this work? How do you maintain your boundaries? How do you do your self-care? How do you do all these things? You put your Zingonium away. Put your arrowhead away. Also, there are all kinds of crazy colors too. All right, ferns. This is the smallest plants I brought to show you today, because this is a really big one. And I like to point this out because sometimes when we have all these different size house plants, we expect they should all be giant plants, and they won't be. This is a really big fern. This fern is 5 years old. This is as probably as big as it will get. Now it'll keep expanding outward, but it's not going to get taller. Okay. Ferns have been around for 360 million years. This particular fern is basically a living dinosaur, which is pretty neat. So if you want to get really creative, you can get a little terrarium and fill it full of ferns and put tiny plastic dinosaurs in it. They would have been around at the same time. The leaf shape and type indicates water needs. Bird's nest ferns that have big, thick, fat, long leaves, staghorn ferns that have those same kind of leaves. This one in the picture that has like big, thick leaves, it doesn't need as much water because it stores more water in the leaves. It has more ability to do that. This fern that's got really thin, beautiful, delicate, soft leaves can never dry out, ever. If you are a person who likes to forget to water their plants, as we all do sometimes, ferns are maybe not for you, and that's okay. Get cactuses. You can have all the cactuses in the world. They need bright and direct light. Ferns do. Who's confused by the words bright and direct light?
Yeah.
If you've had plants. Because what does that mean? Bright and direct, yes, bright and direct sunlight. But does it mean sunlight, or does it mean a grow light? Or does it mean shade? Or does it mean some morning sun and no sun? What does it mean? So this is where you have to kind of understand yourself and what you're dealing with, right? Ferns grow under the trees on a riverbank. So when we say bright and direct light, these guys might get a little bit of downward sunlight, but they're really not getting any direct sun at all. And direct sun means like, I am a sunbeam on this plant. So they're not ever really getting any direct sun. I always recommend, if you are getting, if you're getting a plant, figure out where it came from. Does it live in the desert in the wild? Does it live under the cover of trees in the rainforest? Does it live in 1 square foot mile in the foothills of Tibet with a 30-degree temperature difference every day, and you didn't know that when you bought it, but now you're stuck with this stupid thing? My husband is no longer surprised by plants in the refrigerator. Yeah. You gotta know where stuff comes from, or else you end up with orchids in the refrigerator. Ferns prefer to be damp. They like to be wet. Think about these sort of as like, in terms of water needs, they're extroverts, right? Like they just more all the time. You really can't sort of overwater them, really. Some of us are that way. Like more people, I just want more people. Throw more people at me, as many people as I can get. Some of those are your golden retriever people. Some of us are black cat people where it's like, of course you stay over there, you stay over here. That's enough for me. Like I'll just If you and another person sitting 10 feet apart in a room reading silently together sounds like your ideal day, you are a black cat person. I don't care if you want to be a golden retriever, I don't care if you have to be a golden retriever or a black cat. That's okay. These are different. Ferns are different than every other plant. And I think these are kind of good to showcase the uniqueness for a lot of things because they've had themselves figured out for a long time. Ferns have basically not changed in 360 million years. That's incredible. The nerve plants? Nope. They do not have that many years of growth on them. Ferns know exactly what they want. So it's just something to kind of consider. They know themselves and they accept themselves. They figured it out like 360 million years ago. They said, this is good and I'm staying like this. I think we can learn a lot from that. Something also to be said for developing consistency in your season. Because we're getting hotter out, that means my home, whether I keep the AC on or not, that's going to affect this guy. This fern's going to dry out a lot more frequently. So I'm going to need to water it more. In the winter, when it's cooler and stuff isn't drying out as frequently, I will need to water it.
Yes.
You guys are great. I think sometimes we just need to accept ourselves where we're at. If you're in a depressive season, that's okay. A lot of us are coming out of that seasonal depressive funk because, like, it's a gorgeous day. Ferns aren't fussy. Ferns are not your nerve plants. By the time a fern decides to tell you it is struggling, it is gone. It's gone. But 360 million years of unchangedness is really like, that's some commitment. They don't need to be anything else, right? They don't flower or develop seed pods. That's why they have, they'll develop their, I'm now forgetting the word, but when you see big ferns, they have the spores on the underside of the leaves. It's because it's the easiest seed development mechanism. That's just how they've been forever. It was effective, they got it right the first time, and didn't need to change it. So, and you know what also? Some of you are fussy plants, some of you are hothouse orchids, and I love that for you. Be the hothouse orchid. If you're a fern, be a fern. Don't try to be a hothouse orchid if you're a fern. Don't try to be a fern if you're a hothouse orchid. Okay, last couple of pieces here. Let's talk about mindfulness, because this is a word I get asked about all the time. What is mindfulness? How do I do mindfulness? Am I doing mindfulness? That is a great question. So, let me put the fern away and get out the real big boy here. Some of you are going home with these guys.
Pretty.
I know. These are my favorite. This is called a croton. These are native to South Africa. And this one's a little bit green because all the new leaf development was done in the winter when it had less light. They really do not develop color well under grow lights. If you want these guys to be super colorful. There's another like really super colorful one on the photo. They need direct sun for that. So, crotons are tropical plants. You can grow these outdoors as patio plants. You can also grow them inside as house plants. If you are kind of doing the houseplant thing and you're moving them indoors or outdoors or you're growing plants outside, it's important to kind of make some decisions about what's perennial and what's annual. And it's hard to kind of remember and distinguish between the two. If you grow crotons outside only, and you don't bring them into the winter, they become annual plants. Tropical plants have not acclimated to Ohio winters yet. No. Just to affirm you all in your seasonal depression, which we all kind of have, this is the grayest part of the country. We get more rain than Seattle does. So if you feel bummed out about all the gray, because really there's a lot here. These will die off if you leave them outside. They cannot tolerate temperatures below about 55 degrees. It's fine to say, I love that plant, and I want to put it outside, and I'm not pulling it in. That's enough. I'm going to get 6 months of enjoyment out of it, and I don't really care to entertain it any farther than that. You're not doing anybody a disservice. If you know that you're just gonna leave it outside and grow it as an annual, and next year, you're gonna go back to the garden center and buy another one and do the same thing over again, that is absolutely fine. But if you plan to grow this one as a perennial, and you wanna keep this one, you have to pull it inside. It requires intention, okay? The more sun it gets, the more colors it's gonna have. The less sun it gets, the less colors it's gonna have. Not that I think this green is still really, really pretty, but if you want those bright reds and oranges, it needs more sun. These are not typically long-lived. Even if you grow them inside, you have 5-6 years out of this plant. Jades, Christmas cactuses, aloes, orchids, those are your plants that will live 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Okay? And I'm saying that from experience. I have my grandmother's aloe at 65 years old.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it looks like it is 65 years old. Not an attractive plant. But these aren't typically long-lived. It's also why it's okay to grow them outside as an annual. We're not hurting anybody. It's not going to live that long anyways. And something else, like each leaf is different. Crotons, in particular, will just put out weird shaped leaves, like just because. It's sort of like they wanted to try on a new hat. And then just this one leaf will be different. Whatever you decide to do with your croton, it's going to add beauty to your space. There's no wrong decision to make here. So, what do these guys have to tell us? Right? Because we can learn from all of our living friends, and not just plants. There's something to be learned from possums and raccoons and cats and dogs too, but that's a different presentation that I didn't make yet. So, and also, I'm not interested in trying to trap a raccoon. So, crotons are all about intentionality. If you want them to be like these, because they will do that, they'll be green and red, orange, and purple, you have to really be giving them the right conditions and thinking about what you want to do with them. They're also a great mindfulness tool, because like I could sit and stare at each individual leaf on this plant for hours. They're all different, they're all beautiful, and that's really what mindfulness is sitting with your house plants, or your cats, or your dogs, or whatever it is that you want to sit with. You can go outside and look at plants outside. You don't have to have house plants to do this. Slowing down, sitting with the things, using your 5 senses, touching the leaves, looking at the plant, looking at the stem. You can even try to like sketch it out if you want to. And just take time to sit with yourself and allow your body to just be in that moment. We're not thinking about tomorrow, yesterday, the grocery list, the screaming people that live in our house, the screaming cats that live in our house, the screaming whoever. I don't know about y'all's situation, but there seems to be just a lot of screaming in and around the house and neighborhood. So, it's joyful screaming, not panicked screaming. But really, like, taking time to reflect on what is the desired outcome. If you need to set a boundary with somebody, what do you want to achieve? I heard somebody say peace, and that's really what it is, right? Bear in mind, my little sister's almost 10 years younger than me, and her calling me in the middle of the night to sometimes just tell me she found a good movie on Netflix did not bring me peace, which made me react poorly to her. And that's not what I want, right? Like, I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm screaming and yelling at her. Y'all do a lot for a lot of people. The work that you do is really, really necessary and important. And you're showing up mentally, physically, physiologically, psychologically for the people that you serve, for the people in your communities, and then have to go home and show up in that same way for your friends, your family, your relatives. It's a lot to contain. And so oftentimes the simplest question is, where am I trying to get to? Do I need to like activate my body and kind of wake it up and get some movement in, or do I actually just like need to let my bones settle for a little bit? And then exploring expectations. Like, to be honest with you, if you grow this croton outside and forget about it, don't be sad that it died. It doesn't like the winter. I talk to so many people who, I have a plant and it died. Why did it die? I don't know. You need to give me some information. Well, I didn't water it for 6 months. How long did you expect it to live without water? You know, if you are wanting an easy house plant. Don't buy an orchid. Don't do it. I have lots of them. Some of them are easier than others, but generally, like, that's not a good starter plant for folks. If you want something easy, buy a pothos. You can't kill those things. You turn them upside down in a compost heap. They'll come back. But what are your expectations for your, and lastly, what are your expectations for you? Are they reasonable? Can you be in 7 places at once? No, that's not a reasonable expectation to have for yourself. And also bear in mind with that, with your season, you're going to have less capacity to show up in different times in your life. Some of you are my Christmas folks. Some of you really are. Christmas is your season. You get the decorations out October 1st, and you do the whole thing. And I can see some of you who are like, you don't even know how many totes I have. I got so many inflatables. If that's your season, that's amazing. Summer may not be your season. And that can be confusing when everyone else is like, Summer, 4th of July, popsicles, and you're like, no. Santa. Cold blankets. So, being aware of yourself. Being aware of what you're working with. Protons, again, are what you make them. If you give them a lot of light, and you give them some warmth, they're gonna be gorgeous. If you just want something to fill up a corner of your house, you're like, I want a fast-growing plant that's green. You can just set it in any old corner, it'll grow. It just may not be red, it might be green. So, all right. Take time to do what makes your soul happy. I always tell people, like, there's almost 300 different names. Some of you are not going to be plant people. That's okay. I don't think everybody should be a plant person, which sounds a little controversial, because houseplants are not everybody's happy, and that's okay. But if your happy is your pets, and maybe your pet is a lizard or a snake or a turtle, if that's your happy, it does not matter. If your happy is being alone, if your happy is being in community, if your happy is being inside or outside, it doesn't matter. Make time for it. Nobody will give you that time back. The number one thing I say to my clients, make time for self-care, because if you don't take it, nobody's gonna make it. Right? Nobody will make that time for you. You have to make it for yourself. All right, last 3 pieces to remember here. Mental wellness is an active process. You don't have mental wellness because it just like hits you one day. Like the mental wellness fairy does not come and deposit wellness sprinkles at nighttime randomly to a select 70% of folks, right? That'd be really cool if it did. But it's an active process, kind of like taking care of your plants. You cannot, there is no plant that needs no water and no light. Choose that in a corner. Those plants are plastic and they're great, but they're not a living plant. Okay? Take time to reflect, right? Active reflection also takes time and intention. And I'm not talking about an hour. You don't have to sit down with a journal. Dear diary, today, these are all the things I think about active and intention. Sometimes it takes 60 seconds to say, wait, hold on. Do I actually want to sit down on the couch and scroll through Instagram for 3 hours, or do I want to walk to the mailbox and back, at least, if nothing else? You get to decide. I don't have judgments. You can decide for yourselves. And then the last piece, life happens. I think we all know that, do we not? Yeah. Y'all know that more than most people. I have to explain that to some people. Life happens. You cannot prevent everything from occurring. But if you're doing your self-care and you're mitigating the issues that you can mitigate, you're managing your chronic health conditions, you're setting healthy boundaries, you have somewhat attention on your health and well-being and the health and well-being of your family, when life does happen, it's easier for us to get our feet up under ourselves. Because life's gonna happen no matter what. Everybody's gonna, your sister's gonna forget to call you at 3 a.m. and have you think there's an emergency and she's not something on Netflix, right? That's my life. But sometimes we don't sleep well. Sometimes we have a rainy day and we were hoping to go out and work in the garden. Sometimes it's worse than that. But if we keep our faculties somewhat underneath us, we're not falling all the way to the floor when life does happen. So, remember, you are a plant. You are not a toaster. You are not broken. You do not need to be fixed. So, thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Andy. And I want to let you know, I have a palm tree that's 18 years old. It's my longest relationship ever. Oh, we have one question. We got about 30 seconds. Can you yell it out?
Yes, I can. I'm human, very human. Music is important. Your spirit and soul, my relationship, things like that. What is the similarity between music and life? Is there?
Music is important to us and to our soul. Is it important to our plants, and what's the relationship to it?
I don't know that there's, I mean, they've done some.
One of your plants.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, honestly, I think